welcome to this interview with Mamer, spokesperson of Ursula von der Leyen, and of course also the European Commission. Mr. Mamer, welcome to this interview. I want to start with the first question. What are the most important things you do as a spokesperson of Ursula von der Leyen?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to this interview. It's a real pleasure to be able to explain what I do and what the European Commission does. So I'm the chief spokesperson of the European Commission, and therefore, of course, the spokesman for the Commission's president, Mrs. von der Leyen, as you said, and that means that I'm in charge of the day-to-day relations with the media on the activities of the European Commission. I lead a team of spokespeople who each in their specific field are there to explain what the Commission does and answer questions from the media.
Mm-hmm. How did your career within the European Commission start?
God, that's a long time ago, and it had nothing to do with the media. I started in the Commission, I think, 27 years ago. And at that time, I started working on a program called the European Social Fund. So these are grants that we give to member states, to EU countries, to help them develop social policies in the field of training, for example, youth development, etc., etc. And since then, I've had many different jobs in the Commission until I took on this job.
Mm-hmm. What are the main objectives of the European Commission?
Well, that would take too long to describe, but let's perhaps focus on this Commission. This European Commission had set political guidelines, the political guidelines of the President of the Commission, Mrs. von der Leyen, and these political guidelines included front and center managing the green transition. So making sure that the European Union becomes a climate neutral continent. And indeed, we are putting in place policies to make sure that by 2050, we reach a target which we have set of being climate neutral, the first climate neutral continent. So that's all the activities that need to be undertaken to meet that goal. Then there's what we call the digital transition. We want to modernize the European economy and European society to make sure that it is taking up all the opportunities that are offered by digital technologies. There are many areas where Europeans are very strong when it comes to digital, but there are also areas where they lag behind some of our main competitors, in particular, as we know, the US or China. And so we want to make sure that our core strengths are reflected also economically in our digital economy, but at the same time respecting European values, in particular data privacy, freedom of choice, etc., etc. We have other priorities, of course. On the economy, we are working for an economy that works for people. To give you examples, the pandemic has had a major impact on Europeans from an economic point of view. And we put in place proposals. We put in place a fund, 90 billion euros, which gives loans to member states so that they can finance partial employment programs, so temporary employment programs, so that people are not made redundant by their companies when they face difficulties. And we have also adopted plans which are worth 800 billion euros, where Europe basically went on the market and raised capital together. And this capital is being given to member states in the form of loans, principally in grants, in order to, well, grants and loans, I should say, in order to finance economic recovery and modernization. To give you some examples. But of course, the European Union also works a lot on many other issues, such as the rule of law, making sure that our societies remain democratic and have strong institutions, freedom of the press, for example, being one of the core concepts. We work a lot with third countries. We're the biggest donor of international aid. and more generally, of course, with partners across the globe on issues such as trade, for example, or multilateralism when it comes to many issues such as climate change, the environment, the oceans, etc., etc. This is only a small snapshot, but with the time that we have, I cannot go into further details.
Do you think the European Commission does a good job at this moment?
I certainly think so, definitely. You need to remember that when the pandemic started, there were no vaccines, and many member states would not have been able to buy vaccines on their own. And so the European Commission coordinated the purchase of vaccines. In the meantime, a billion of doses of vaccines, which have been delivered to European citizens, and which means that Europe is now, if not the most vaccinated, one of the most vaccinated places on Earth. More than 80% of adults in the EU have received full vaccination, 50% have even received their booster, and this was all thanks to the work that the European Commission did.
What have you learned through your career?
Well, that's a very open question. What my career has reinforced is my belief that many of today's challenges can only be mastered by cooperation at European level. What people often forget is that the EU 27, as a percentage of world population, represents somewhere around 6% of the world's population. At the beginning of the 20th century, it was above 20%. So actually, we are now a very, very small share of the world, and economic growth is stronger in other parts of the world because they are younger, for example, also because they're catching up. This key case, for example, is China. Now, it is clear that when we work together, for example, to buy vaccines, for example, to define industrial standards, for example, to do groundbreaking research, we can only do so well in a manner which actually makes an impact if we do so together. Individual member states can do a certain number of things on their own, but their weight on the international scene means that their voice is much better heard if it goes through the European Union. And throughout my whole career, this is one thing that has been reinforced. The second thing that I have learned is that we Europeans, we all often like to think that we're very different from one another. And in some respects, we of course are, because we live under different climates, we speak different languages, we have different cultures. But you put a bunch of Europeans together and you bring them over to the United States or to China or to Africa or to Latin America or anywhere else, and they will suddenly understand that they resemble each other a lot more than they thought previously. And making sure that we as Europeans, we live together on this continent in a harmonious way, enjoying the freedoms that we have of traveling across the European Union, studying anywhere we like, working anywhere we like in the European Union, is something which I think is a great achievement that requires that we work very hard every day to keep it as a reality and strengthen it.
I also want to talk about the issue of today, or the problems that we see in Ukraine. How do you personally view the tensions surrounding Ukraine?
Well, I'm the spokesman of the Commission, so I never give personal views. I give the views of the European Commission.
Yes.
And our views, the views of the European Commission are very clear. We stand by Ukraine completely. In fact, the European Union has provided over 17 billion of financial support to Ukraine since 2014, and not later than yesterday, we adopted a proposal to grant Ukraine a loan of 1.2 billion euros, an emergency loan to help it stabilize its economy in view of the threats and the tensions because of Russia's aggressive actions. So our view is that Ukraine is a sovereign, independent country. We support its territorial integrity. We urge the Russian authorities not to do anything that could heighten the tension, but on the contrary, that should lower the tension. And in the meantime, we will continue supporting Ukraine with all the means that are in our power.
But are there maybe some things that, like, if Russia will go for an invasion, are there some consequences that will be?
If Russia were to move to invade Ukraine, then we have very, very clearly said that there will be massive consequences through sanctions that will be adopted by the European Union and the Commission and its external action and the External Action Service of the European Union have been working on preparing these sanctions. We never discussed them in public, so don't even ask me.
But an economic way, it's normal, I think, to say an economic way.
These are, of course, sanctions of different nature against people, against entities, economic sanctions, etc., etc.
My last question for you, Mr. Mamer. What is your personal wish for the future of Europe?
I think that the first most immediate wish that everybody has is that we get out of the pandemic. And we have actually made very good progress thanks to our successful vaccine procurement strategy, which has given member states the doses they need in order to vaccinate their population. And we will continue to do this. Of course, it's not enough to vaccinate Europe. We need to contribute to the vaccination of the rest of the world, which is something on which we are very, very active. So it's getting out of the pandemic and, of course, in the process, also coming out stronger from an economic and environmental point of view. And this is what we've done through our Next Generation EU program, the 800 billion euros that I have mentioned before. The second thing that, of course, I wish is that, and that the Commission is working towards, is that Europe remains a peaceful continent where people enjoy maximum freedom. We know that there have been tensions at our eastern border, the hybrid attacks from Belarus and things like that. So we are working to ensure that Europe can continue, European citizens can continue to enjoy a peaceful, secure life with opportunities. And of course, ultimately, everything depends as well on our capacity to tackle climate change and ensure safe environment, and that's definitely what I think everybody wishes that we achieve.
Thank you, Mr. Mamer, for this interview, and I wish you all the best of luck for the future.
Thank you for having me on your program.